The moment she stepped onto the plane, time seemed to stop. The hum of the jet engines faded under the sound of stairs, long, judging, silent stairs. She moved through the narrow aisle with quiet grace, her navy blue suit pressed sharp as confidence itself, her steps measured, her face unreadable. Seat 3A. That's what her boarding pass said. But as she reached it, a man already sitting beside the window looked up from his tablet and froze. Then came that kind of laugh, low, mocking, designed to draw attention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice soaked in disbelief. "I think you're lost. Coach is back there." Every sound in the cabin died instantly. A couple holding hands in row 4 paused mid-conversation. A businessman scrolling on his phone slowly lowered it. Even the flight attendant, halfway through closing an overhead bin, hesitated. The woman in the navy suit didn't move. She just looked at him, her face calm, her eyes steady. "No, sir," she said softly. "This is my seat." He tilted his head, a smirk stretching across his face like a stain. "No way," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "They let anyone up here now?" A few passengers chuckled nervously, unsure if they should. The woman's expression didn't change. She simply handed her boarding pass to the attendant who'd stepped forward, her voice still steady. "Could you confirm, please?" The attendant scanned it, looked between the woman and the man, then nodded. "Seat 3A is correct." The man leaned back, scoffing. "Figures," he muttered under his breath. "Probably upgraded on charity points." The woman placed her small leather bag beneath the seat in front of her, her movements deliberate, graceful, without 1 ounce of fluster. She sat down, clasped her hands in her lap, and turned her gaze toward the window. Her silence filled the space between them like gravity, quiet, unshakable, commanding. The man shifted uncomfortably, as if her composure somehow exposed the ugliness of his words. The plane door sealed shut with a heavy hiss. The attendants began their safety demonstration, voices warm but strained, like they could feel the tension radiating from seat 3B. The man cleared his throat. "So," he said with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh, "business trip?" She nodded once, not looking away from the glass. "Yes." "Of course," he continued. "I guess everyone's got a hustle." His grin widened. "What do you do?" Her reply was calm, almost casual. "I work in management." He chuckled again. "Management, huh? At one of those diversity programs or something?" The words hung in the air, sharp as glass. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened the small notebook in her lap, wrote something with neat, confident strokes, then closed it gently. The quiet returned. The engines roared as the plane began to taxi down the runway. The man's arrogance filled every corner of the first-class cabin. He ordered champagne before takeoff, snapping his fingers when the attendant passed. "Make it cold," he said. "Not like last time." He smirked, glancing sideways at the woman beside him as if waiting for her approval or her discomfort. He got neither. She simply breathed. "Calm. Still." As if his noise couldn't reach her. When the plane finally lifted off, the city lights fell away beneath them like stars fading into darkness. The woman reached into her briefcase, pulled out a slim laptop, and began typing. Her screen glowed against her face, focused, serene, unbothered. The man looked over, trying to peek, but she angled the screen away. His irritation deepened. He took another sip of champagne. "You must be one of those motivational speakers," he said with a sneer. "You know, talking about empowerment and all that?" Her eyes met his now. "Calm. Direct. Something like that." For a second, he couldn't look away. There was something in her gaze, something he didn't understand. Not pride. Not anger. Something older, quieter, stronger. Dignity. And it unnerved him. He turned to the flight attendant. "Do you see this?" he said, gesturing toward her. "It's getting ridiculous. You pay thousands for first class, and suddenly it's a community project." The attendant's smile faltered. "Sir, please." "No," he interrupted. "I'm serious. You people need to." That's when she spoke again. Her tone was soft, but every word carried weight. "Sir," she said, "you might want to stop talking now." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't loud, but it stopped him cold. For the first time since she'd boarded, he didn't have a comeback. She turned back to her laptop, typing once more. A small smile crossed her lips, faint but certain. The screen briefly caught a reflection of her email subject line, Quarterly Review, Harwell and Partners. He didn't notice. Not yet. The flight smoothed out at 30,000 feet. The lights dimmed. A movie flickered quietly across a few small screens. The man leaned back, crossing his arms, but something in the air had changed. The passengers who once laughed quietly now watched him with subtle disapproval. Even the attendant avoided his gaze. The woman beside him just kept working, unbothered, untouchable. Halfway through the flight, he tried again. "You know," he said, forcing a grin, "I actually run a big firm. Finance. Real stuff. Not talk. Harwell and Partners. Ever heard of it?" This time, she looked at him fully. Her face softened just a little, as if she almost pitied him. "Yes," she said quietly. "I know it very well." He smiled, proud. "I figured. We're kind of a big deal." She said nothing else. Just turned back to the window, her reflection calm in the dark glass. Hours passed. The cabin lights dimmed further. A few passengers slept. The man beside her did not. Something about her silence began to crawl under his skin. It wasn't indifference, it was something else. It was awareness. Like she already knew the ending to a story he hadn't even realized he was in. The flight attendant returned one last time to check on them. "Anything else before we begin descent?" she asked softly. The man shook his head. The woman closed her laptop with quiet precision. "No, thank you," she said. As the plane dipped lower, the city lights reappeared, bright veins of gold stretching beneath the clouds. The man adjusted his tie, trying to regain his composure. He didn't know why, but sitting beside her now made him feel smaller. He didn't like it. When the landing gear touched down, he exhaled with relief. "Well," he said, forcing a laugh, "hope you enjoyed your little upgrade." She smiled faintly, turning to him at last. "I did," she said. "Thank you." Something in her tone sent a chill through him. He couldn't explain it, but it didn't sound like gratitude. It sounded like truth waiting to reveal itself. As the plane slowed down the runway, she looked straight ahead, serene. He leaned back, shaking his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered. But deep down, some quiet voice inside him whispered a question he couldn't shake. Who was she really? And though he didn't know it yet, that question was about to change his entire life, because before this flight was over, he'd realized the woman he mocked didn't just belong in first class. She owned it. The tension in first class hung like humidity, thick, invisible, and suffocating. The man in seat 3B had grown louder, his voice carrying across the cabin like a bad song no one could turn off. The woman beside him, still calm in her navy suit, had become a mirror to his arrogance. She said nothing, but her silence spoke louder than any argument. It was the kind of silence that made people uncomfortable, the kind that made them question their own behavior. Yet he didn't see it that way. He saw it as defiance. A challenge. And he wasn't the kind of man to let a quiet black woman win a silent war. He ordered another glass of champagne, snapping his fingers at the flight attendant. "Make it quick," he said, not bothering to look up. His voice had that corporate confidence, entitlement disguised as charm. He leaned back in his seat, glanced at her laptop, and smirked. "You know," he said casually, "I've been in this company for years. Worked my way up. People like me built the system." She didn't reply. She simply typed. Her fingers glided across the keys, soft but steady. He leaned closer, his tone sharpening. "You should be grateful," he muttered. "Most people don't get this kind of seat. Or this kind of life." Her eyes flicked toward him, calm and slow, like the way a teacher looks at a student who hasn't learned his lesson yet. "Grateful," she repeated softly. "For what, exactly?" He grinned. "For being here. For being allowed up front. You know, some people just don't fit the first-class vibe." That line caught a few ears. The man across the aisle looked down, pretending to check his phone. A woman 2 rows ahead shifted uncomfortably. Everyone heard it. No one said a word. Silence became complicity. The flight attendant returned, setting his drink on the tray. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, with a wink she didn't return. His arrogance filled every inch of the cabin. He took a sip, sighed with satisfaction, then leaned toward the woman again. "See, that's respect," he said. "You just have to know how to talk to people." She didn't even look up. "I see," she said quietly. "Do you always talk to people this way?" He chuckled. "Only when they forget their place." That made her pause. She closed her laptop gently, folded her hands, and looked directly at him. Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "Places can change," she said. He frowned, confused, but before he could answer, the plane shuddered. Turbulence. Trays rattled, glasses trembled, and passengers gasped. The lights flickered once. He cursed under his breath, clutching his armrest. She, however, stayed completely still. Her eyes didn't flinch from the clouds outside. Her breathing remained even, peaceful. The flight attendant's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The man tried to laugh it off, but his knuckles stayed white around the armrest. "Guess this is what happens when you let anyone fly first class," he muttered. The woman turned her head toward him, her gaze unshaken. "You seem nervous," she said softly. "I just don't like turbulence," he snapped. "Understandable," she replied. "It reminds people they're not really in control." The words landed like a quiet punch. He stared at her, unsure what to say. Something about her tone, steady, almost compassionate, made him feel exposed. He looked away, pretending to focus on his drink, but his hand trembled slightly as he lifted it. When the turbulence passed, the cabin exhaled together. The woman reopened her laptop, calm as ever, and resumed typing. Her email subject line glowed for a brief moment in the reflection of the screen. "Quarterly Review, Harwell and Partners." The man noticed the company name and smirked. "Harwell and Partners? What are you doing with them?" "Administrative work." She smiled faintly. "Something like that." He laughed. "You know, I work there too. Pretty high up, actually. I run most of the operations. The whole department basically runs on me." Her eyes lingered on him for a second. "That's impressive," she said softly. "Yeah," he said, relaxing back into his seat. "I keep the lights on. Without people like me, companies like that wouldn't even survive. Everyone else just collects checks." He said it proudly, but she didn't respond. She just turned back to her screen, typing something that made his words sound smaller than ever. As the hours passed, the sky outside turned the color of melted silver. The plane cruised smoothly now, but inside, tension brewed beneath the surface. The attendants noticed. Their glances toward her had changed, more respectful, almost reverent. When they refilled drinks, they spoke to her with quiet deference. "Is there anything you need, Ms.?" one of them asked softly. She smiled. "No, thank you. I'm fine." The man caught it. That tone. That Ms. It stirred something uneasy in him. "What's that about?" he asked. "Just manners," she replied. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why were the attendants suddenly treating her differently? Why did they look nervous when he spoke to her? His confidence began to falter, just slightly. He turned to her again, his arrogance trying to cover the cracks forming in his composure. "You know," he said, "in business, it's all about power. You either have it, or you don't. And if you don't, you better learn to stay in your lane." She looked up, studying him for a moment. Her voice stayed calm, but this time it carried an edge that cut deeper than anger. "You seem very sure of what power looks like." "Of course," he said. "I've earned mine." She leaned back, closing her laptop now, her expression unreadable. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe power isn't something you hold, it's something you reveal." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the window again. The sunlight from the horizon painted her reflection gold, almost glowing. Her silence unsettled him more than her words ever could. The flight began its slow descent, the announcement chiming through the speakers. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Passengers shifted, buckled, murmured softly. The man loosened his tie, eager to get off the plane. But around him, subtle whispers rippled. The attendants exchanged looks. One of them even straightened her uniform before approaching the woman. "It's been an honor to have you on board again," she said with a polite smile. "Thank you," the woman replied, warmth in her tone. "You and your team have been wonderful." Again. That word hit him like a jolt. Again. He turned to look at her, confusion flashing in his eyes. "You've flown this route before?" She nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "A few times. Company travel." He blinked. "Harwell and Partners." Her smile deepened slightly, but she didn't answer. She just turned back to the clouds outside the window. For the first time since the flight began, he didn't have anything to say. No jokes. No smirks. Just silence. The kind that grows when your gut knows something your ego refuses to admit. As the wheels lowered and the ground came into view, he tried to shake the unease from his chest. But the thought wouldn't leave him. Who was this woman? Why did her presence suddenly make everyone treat her like she didn't just belong there, she belonged above it? The plane hit the runway. The cabin jolted. And as they rolled toward the gate, he glanced at her one last time. Her posture was straight, her eyes calm, her hands resting easily in her lap. And though he didn't know it yet, the very ground he walked on was about to shift beneath him, because the woman he mocked for not belonging was about to remind him who really held the sky. The plane has settled into silence. Only the faint hum of the engines fills the air. Michael, still brooding in his seat, opens his laptop, determined to drown his guilt in numbers and reports. But when he types in his company portal to review upcoming audits, his heart jolts. There it is, the name he can't escape. Amara Lewis, Executive Finance Controller, Global Operations. For a moment, he stares. Confused. Then terrified. The woman he just humiliated, the same woman he ordered out of first class, is not a charity case or a random passenger. She's his company's new financial controller, the one whose signature approves every top-tier salary, including his. His throat tightens. His pulse races. Across the aisle, Amara opens her own laptop. Poise. Her reflection flickers in the screen like quiet fire. The air between them thickens. A flight attendant offers her a drink. She declines, too focused on her report, a report with Michael's name written in bold red at the top. The irony burns. Michael leans forward, whispering, You work for Apex Holdings?" Amara turns slowly, her gaze steady but heavy. "No," she says softly, "I run their numbers. Including yours." The words slice through him. Passengers around begin to sense the shift. The man who barked orders now looks small, humbled. His voice cracks as he mumbles something about a misunderstanding, but Amara doesn't engage. She returns to her work, each keystroke echoing like quiet thunder. For the first time in his life, Michael feels powerless, and the altitude only makes the fall steeper. The power dynamic has flipped, but the lesson has just begun. When the plane touches down, everything feels heavier, the air, the silence, the weight of what Michael has done. He lingers in his seat as other passengers disembark, hoping Amara will leave without saying a word. But she doesn't rush. She stands tall, gathers her files, and faces him with the calm of someone who has already forgiven, but not forgotten. "Mr. Blake," she says quietly, "you judged me before you even saw me." Her words are not angry, they're sorrowful. The kind of truth that pierces deeper than rage. Michael tries to apologize, fumbling for words. But Amara raises her hand gently, stopping him. "I'm not the one you owe an apology to," she continues. "It's every person you've ever thought was beneath you. Every voice you've ignored." He nods, his eyes wet, his voice trembling. "I didn't know." She interrupts softly. "You never tried to." In that moment, Michael Blake, the man who thought status could define worth, feels stripped of all titles. He realizes how fragile power is when it's built on pride. As they walk into the terminal, it's Amara who's greeted by company executives waiting to welcome her. One of them smiles and says, "Ma'am, your new regional director is here too, Mr. Blake." Michael freezes. The humiliation he once inflicted now mirrors back at him. But Amara, still composed, turns to him and says, "Let's start over." This time as equals. The world seems to pause. A lesson unfolds in silence, that respect is not earned by wealth, nor lost by skin. Because true class isn't a seat on a plane. It's how you treat people when you think no one's watching.